Hello, 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 everyone. This is Louise Hicks, your host of Aim to Purpose Spiritual Empowerment Hour. And I'd like to speak a little bit this time about Black men and their speaking up and speaking out about what President Obama has said about them voting for Vice President Kamala Harris. And these Black men are expressing themselves using their critical thinking skills, and they are stating that they do not accept President Obama's advice to them because they feel he's lecturing them. With that said, again, I'm Louise Hicks. Please share, give it a like, thumbs up, leave your comments, and by all means, subscribe. And thank you all for your subscriptions and listening to my podcast because I always aim to bring you information that is informative about this election. And I do not tell anybody how to vote, who to vote for, or whether you should vote or not vote, because I believe it is your own business and it is your perspective to respond according to what your purpose is and what your agenda is. And with that said, I would like for you to listen, if you haven't already heard, to what President Obama has to say. And then I'm going to play another video where this pastor, from what I have heard thus far, I believe from my perspective that he gives an exceptional analysis of what his thoughts are as a Black man and from a spiritual perspective. So, with that said, let's go ahead and let me listen to you. Let me allow you to listen to President Obama without any interruption. And here we go.
I'm going to go ahead and just speak some truths, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Because my understanding, based on reports I'm getting from campaigns and communities, is that we have not yet seen the same kinds of energy and turnout in all quarters of our neighborhoods and communities as we saw when I was running. Now, I also want to say that that seems to be more pronounced with the brothers. So if you don't mind, just for a second, I'm going to speak to y'all directly and say that when you have a choice that is this clear, when on the one hand you have somebody who grew up like you, knows you, went to college with you, understands the struggles and pain and joy that comes from those experiences, who's had to work harder and do more and overcome and achieves the second highest office in the land and is putting forward concrete proposals to directly address the things that are vital in our neighborhoods and our communities, from housing to making sure that our mothers and our fathers and our grandparents can afford medicine, and making sure that we are dealing with prices that are too high and rents that are too high, and are committed to making sure that we maintain the Affordable Care Act, so everybody's got health care and cares about things like education and entrepreneurship in our neighborhoods. And that's on one side. And on the other side, you have someone who has consistently shown disregard, not just for the communities, but for you as a person. And you're thinking about sitting out? I'm not. But, you know, because of Pookie might be. And you're coming up with all kinds of reasons and excuses. I've got a problem with that. Because part of it makes me think, and I'm speaking to men directly now, part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. And you're coming up with other alternatives and other reasons for that. And I think anybody you are talking to in a barbershop, anybody you are talking to in your house, in your family, at church, who is coming with that kind of attitude, I think you have to ask them, well, how can that be? Because the women in our lives have been getting our backs this entire time. They've been raising us and working and having our backs. And when we get in trouble, and the system's not working for us, they're the ones who are out there marching and protesting. And so now you're thinking about sitting out or even supporting somebody who has a history of denigrating you because you think that's a sign of strength, because that's what being a man is, putting women down. That's not acceptable. That's not, this shouldn't even be a question.
Okay.
I understand it.
Let me
Based
stop
on
sharing.
reports I'm getting from campaigns.
We're going to stop sharing this one, and we're going to share another video from this pastor who has given, he's a Black pastor, and he has given a spiritual perspective. And it has been the most profound that I've heard in response to President Obama's lecture to the Black man about voting for Kamala Harris. So let me get that video, and I want to share that one with you. And let's see what your thoughts are on this one. Okay, give me a few minutes, and I'm going to find that one. And we are going to see what this one has to say. So let me get it so I can share it. Give me a few minutes, because I really want you to listen to what this Black pastor has to say. He's really giving a different perspective, and his name is James E. Ward Jr., Pastor James E. Ward Jr., and he is giving a different perspective than most of the ones that I've heard. And I want you to listen to what he has to say. So here we go with him. Okay. Here we go.
Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. Just wanted to take a moment to come on to give a brief response to a video I saw today about President Obama speaking to a group of Black men. He's campaigning for Kamala Harris. It's important to note it was a campaign speech, I think in the city of Pittsburgh, speaking to a group of black men and the brothers, black men like me and so many of you. But it was a speech, in essence, stating that as black men, as brothers, that there was some sort of an obligation, or at least an expectation by President Obama for black men to support Kamala Harris because we're black and she's black. But also, he suggested that if black men don't support her, that perhaps they have a problem with a woman in leadership. I thought about that and contemplated that for a little while and wanted to give a response for this reason, not a political response, but I wanted to give a response that is paternal. I want to speak as a father, but I also want to give a response that is pastoral concerning discipling people, discipling families, seeing people develop in the image and the likeness of God. And I just want to suggest that the challenge with that speech is that it suggests that pigmentation is more important than policy. And I think that the narrative of that speech was a little bit degrading to the identity of black men. It suggests that black men are not intelligent, free, and critical thinkers to vote our convictions apart from skin color. Let me frame this a little bit more. In 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, he spoke in his I Have a Dream speech. Very famous line. He says, "I have a dream that one day my four little children will live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." And I believe that the narrative that President Obama is speaking right now undermines Dr. King's dream and suggests that we are in a nation, that he's suggesting that we are defined by the color of our skin and not the content of our character. If black men vote based upon the content of our character, knowing that we're created and made in the image of God, Psalms 139, verse 14, we're fearfully and wonderfully made. Genesis 1:26, we're created in God's image and his likeness. I just want to speak to the idea that a political suggestion and what tends to be political manipulation and dictating what the identity of a black man should be based upon him voting upon skin color, I think it undermines the identity of young black boys out there, young black men, and it undermines the construct of strong, intact black families. Let me say it this way: there are undoubtedly young men out there who don't have a strong father in the home like me, who don't have a strong pastor in their life like me to help them develop their identity and their character. Young men who are struggling with identity, struggling with even their self-esteem. I respect President Obama. He's a leader. He's a historical leader in the black community and a man of great influence. If a young man who does not have a strong father, a strong pastor, a strong mentor in his life hears a national leader like that speaking definition concerning what it means to be a black man, that can be incredibly damaging. That can undermine what it is that God intends for their lives. And so I just want to create some balance here and to speak from a different perspective to say that you are not obligated to have President Obama or James Ward or Ben Carson or LeBron James or anybody else dictate to you who you are and how you should behave for political reasons. Your identity comes through faith in God. God has defined your life. In Jeremiah chapter 1, before you were formed in your mother's womb, God knew you. He created you. He has purpose for you. Your identity is found in God and is not to be manipulated by the political ambitions and aspirations of politicians today. I just wanted to say that I have a heart and passion for families, to see fathers and families, and to see strong, intact black families in particular. And we just don't need political leaders lecturing us concerning what it means to be a man and a father for political reasons in a way that undermines the role that God has called us into, to be servant leaders to our family. So I just wanted to say that again, with humility, with respect. I honor President Obama. I just don't do the disrespect thing and being sarcastic in any way. I don't attack character. I honor him for his role. But I do think that it's important for us as fathers and even ministry leaders to help create balance so that people have the opportunity to develop the way that God has called them to. The last thing I'll say is this: as citizens of the United States of America, black men, like all other citizens in the United States, according to the founding documents of our nation, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, I also include the Mayflower Compact of 1620. According to those documents and what it means to be a citizen in America, you are free to go into the voting booth. That space is private and sacred, and it's an opportunity for you as an individual to exercise your inalienable rights. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. It's sacred space for you to go as an individual and to cast your vote and to exercise autonomy as an individual, to have a contribution to the future direction of this nation. And it is not up to anyone to dictate to you what those convictions are to be. Be encouraged, be blessed, be strong. I'll talk to you next time.
Okay, I'm going to stop right there and I will stop sharing. And here we go. Now, this was Pastor James Ward, and I ran across this video and I said, I must share this video because it was uh, very important for us to listen to what he had to say from a spiritual perspective. And again, I am Louise Hicks, your host of Aim to Purpose Spiritual Empowerment Hour. And I wanted to bring this to you because it was such a profound conversation that Pastor James Ward, and I'm sharing this with you so you can see the picture here as I speak briefly about this, because you heard what President Obama had to say, his lecturing to Black men, and you heard what Pastor James E. Ward had to say on his perspective and his response to President Obama, because the spotlight is in this 2024 election, the spotlight is on Black men. And from my perspective, it has become as if this particular party, the Democratic Party, feels obviously, from what I'm hearing, that they have the Black woman's vote or women's vote in their pocket already. However, from what I've been seeing and hearing, that is really not the case, particularly with Gen Xers, Gen Zs, and millennials, because many of them, females, they're speaking out and speaking up as well because of the traditional votes that have been given to the Democratic Party collectively, and they have not delivered. And when you think about it, since they haven't delivered over decades and decades, Black people have had enough. And it's not just Black men. However, the focus seems to be in the spotlight on Black men. And Pastor Ward brought out some very profound points when he talked about Dr. Martin Luther King, what he said about the content of our character and not the color of our skin. He brought out about the Black family structure, which is a foundation that is so necessary in this time that we're living in, because we appear to have gotten away from so many of our traditions, and we appear to have gone backward in many aspects of our lives when it comes to spirituality. And this pastor, James E. Ward Jr., really, from what I have heard, gives, from my perspective, one of the most profound um, conversations about the 2024 election and voting. And I just wanted to share this because I feel he really hit the bullseye. And we as Black people should be very concerned about voting and when you go into the voting booth, because he's saying that it is really your own space, your privacy, and no one has the right to dictate to you who you should vote for. It is your business when you get into that booth who you decide to vote for. And he brought out just a lot of perspective from a godly perspective. And I really honed in on what Pastor James E. Ward had to say because he spoke, I feel, from the heart and from a biblical perspective. So therefore, I don't have anything to add to it because President Obama spoke, he gave his response, and now it's up to each one of us, each individual, to make their own decision based on policies, as he said. And is there a Black economic agenda? That's been one of my questions all along, as well as one of the other questions I've had. I've heard uh, Vice President Kamala Harris being asked about reparations, and she really skated around it, talking about studies and what more do we need for them to recognize the powers that shouldn't be, or some people think should be. How many studies do you have to do? There was a study done in California, and that study was very intense. So, how many studies do you have to do when the historical evidence is already present? So, therefore, with all the others who have gotten reparations and so forth, and it's time now to cut the check and just figure that out because history speaks for itself. There is a debt of the heirs of African slaves that were brought over to America to do the work that the whites that brought them over chose not to do. And they wanted the slaves to do the work for them under severe atrocities and abuse. And this needs to be discussed with both candidates. And I don't believe I've heard anyone yet ask former President Trump about reparations. And I would like to hear what his response would be because Kamala Harris danced around it every time she's asked. And even one time she stated she's not going to do anything specifically for Black people. And this is when she was running for president herself. And then she dropped out because I guess she knew there was no chance at that time that she would win the election in 2020. So therefore, let's give it some thought as to what President Obama said, former President Obama, and what Pastor James E. Ward Jr. said. And when you go into that booth, it is really it's a private matter. And that's how I look at it. That's just my perspective because I would never tell anybody who to vote for and how to vote because it's none of my business as to who that person votes for. Whoever wins the presidency in 2024 in this election that's coming up next month, I just pray that they will do the right thing and work toward some common ground here, not just for one specific group, but for all Americans, and to have an agenda for Black America that has been disenfranchised for almost 500 years now. And it's time that the debt is paid, which is reparations for Black descendants of the African slaves that were brought to America and built America against all the atrocities that they have to go through, abuse, hangings, you name it. It's a disgrace, and we must continue to talk about it and never forget our history. Nobody else is forgetting theirs. The Holocaust is not forgotten, the Japanese in the concentration camps. However, it appears that we're supposed to forget our history in this country, which is a disgrace, the most disgraceful of any human being that has lived on American soil. Slavery was a disgrace for this country, and we shall never forget our history. And we need to teach our children our history because they're not going to learn it in the public school system. So it's up to us. And we should be reading these books by Dr. Claude Anderson. And I always like to share that. Black Labor, White Wealth, Powernomics, the Black History Reader, and there are some more books that he's written. And it's up to us to know our history, because if you know your history, a lot of the inappropriate behaviors can be and should be avoided, because we do have to take accountability as well for our own behavior and the problems, many of the problems that stem from slavery. However, we as Black people in this country, we have to start focusing on how we can also empower ourselves intellectually, economically, spiritually, socially, mentally, emotionally, physically. I mean, we really have to focus on empowering ourselves as well. Even though the debt is owed, we must carry on and connect the dots and unify as a people, because that is vital to our survival in this country. And we must demand some policies that will impact us as an ethnic group in America. So with that said, again, I'm Louise Hicks, your host of Aim to Purpose Spiritual Empowerment Hour. Please share, subscribe, leave your comments, and give it a thumbs up. And like this video, as I said. And thanks again for all of your support. I appreciate everyone. And with that said, much love until the next video. And I will be back soon to share. I don't know what will be next, but I'll share something prior to this election, which comes up shortly. We have only a few more days left now. So again, please subscribe and share. Much love.